Dragons in the Game of Thrones universe is the equivalent of having a nuclear bomb in real life. They are massive, flying, fire-breathing reptiles that some Grandmasters believe are more intelligent than humans, and it's believed they are magical in nature as well. But where did they come from? What happened to them? And how powerful were/are they? Well, let's find out. Firstly, where did they come from? Well, in the lore, dragons first appeared in the 14 Fires, a series of volcanoes that circled Old Valyria. Over time, the Valyrians tamed them and created deep emotional connections with them. They rode them into wars, and because of this, they conquered much of Essos. Because the other nations didn't have any means of stopping dragons. uh, However, this is just what the Ancient Valyrians said. There are other rumors that suggest dragons didn't just naturally show up, like a direwolf or something. One theory that the people of Karth believe is that dragons bursted from a second moon in the sky like an egg, which would explain why we only have one moon. Um, that theory doesn't have much credibility to it, and no one else really believes it except them. However, the more popular theory is that Valyrian blood mages bred creatures called wyverns and fireworms. Wyverns were like dragons, just much smaller and can't breathe fire. Fireworms are these massive serpent-like worm things that can breathe and emit fire. Then they just sprinkled some old Valyrian blood on top of that, and boom, bang, there you go. This would explain why people of Valyrian blood, like Targaryens, are the only ones that can tame and ride them. It's also believed a sacrifice of sorts had to happen, and the dragon eggs had to be engulfed in fire as well. This would explain how Daenerys got her 3 dragon eggs to hatch, as it happened when she was cremating Khal Drogo and engulfed herself and her 3 eggs in the flames. It had everything it needed: the sacrifice, the fire, Valyrian blood, you get it. But this theory does lose some steam when you remember King Aegon V Targaryen, also known as Egg. It is widely believed that he sacrificed himself, much of his family, and several of his knights in a massive fire that destroyed Summerhall, an event now known as the Tragedy of Summerhall, in an attempt to bring back the dragons, which had gone extinct decades ago. Why did it work for Dany and not her ancestor? I don't know. Maybe the theory isn't true. Maybe the fire was just an accident and the belief in that is just wrong. Or maybe the dragon eggs or the dragon hatchlings were just crushed in the debris. Who knows? I don't know. No one does. Except, I guess, the Targaryens that were there. So while we don't really know where they came from, these are just the theories that people of the world of Game of Thrones believe. But then, what happened to them? Well, for the dragons in Valyria, they all died alongside the Ancient Valyrians, what is known as the Doom of Valyria. Basically, a massive cataclysmic volcanic eruption from all 14 volcanoes destroyed the once great city and killed everything living there, including the dragons. Dragons are supposed to be fireproof, but the fire was so hot that not even they were protected from it. The only dragons left were the 3 that had left the Targaryens and Valyrians approximately 12 years prior to the Doom of Valyria. Once they landed on Dragonstone and Aegon the Conqueror conquered Westeros and became the first king, the dragons grew in numbers and prospered for the next 150 years. However, they weren't getting nearly as big. They thrived until the Targaryen Civil War broke out, known as the Dance of the Dragons. Basically, half of Westeros supported Rhaenyra Targaryen as the ruler, and the other half supported Aegon II Targaryen. This basically caused the extinction of the dragons, because they all went to war, and this was like the first time dragon on dragon violence was happening. And while the last known dragon laid 5 eggs, none of them hatched and instead petrified. There's a lot of speculation about the last dragons. Many believe that since the Targaryens kept their dragons in the dragon pit in King's Landing, this stunted their growth drastically, as they're meant to be able to roam and fly freely. This would explain why they were getting smaller and smaller in each generation. The last recorded dragon was deformed and sickly, with withered wings, and Tyrion Lannister said it wasn't any bigger than a cat. But it also hinted that the Grand Maesters had poisoned the last dragons, the last few hatchlings, since they detest anything unnatural. And if dragons are magical, that means they're not natural. However, like 100 years later, Daenerys Targaryen was given 3 petrified dragon eggs. These eggs hatch, as I explained earlier. They all grew to be fairly large, with Drogon being the biggest and the one she rode. However, Rhaegal was killed by several scorpion bolts by Euron Greyjoy during the battle at Dragonstone, and Viserion was killed by the Night King and turned into an undead dragon. This means Drogon is the very last of his kind, and he flew off with Dany's dead body after Jon Snow had killed her. We know he flew off east, headed towards Volantis, according to the DVD commentary titled Duty is the Death of Love, but we don't know anything else, and Drogon's the last of his kind. And with Jon Snow being the last Targaryen and being stuck at the wall with no eggs, Drogon will probably die as the last ever dragon to ever live. But how powerful were they? Well, in terms of power, it really just depends on the dragon's size. The bigger they are, the stronger and tougher they are, and the more flames they can produce with their fire breath, and the longer that they can shoot that breath as well, because they would have bigger lungs. In the main show, Drogon is the biggest dragon, and while it's never been said exactly just how big he is, the visual effects producer said that Drogon is 84-ish meters long, which is like 275 feet. I've also seen other people say, though, he's only like 150 feet long, blah, blah, blah. This is the VFX guys, or this is the visual effects guy, or whatever. I'm going to side with him. It's also believed he's not fully grown, as he's only 7 to 8 years old, and dragons don't ever stop growing unless something halts it. So Drogon has a long life ahead of him. He generally overpowered an undead Viserion and could easily destroy buildings and towers under his own weight. Arrows literally bounced off of him, and he was just fine after a scorpion bolt and took attacks from Viserion, including his blue fire breath, and was unharmed basically. He also easily dodged several scorpion bolts at once while he was getting closer to them. And it said that dragons can fly thousands of kilometers in minutes. His fire breath instantly incinerated people to skeletons, destroyed several buildings, towers, and or ships at once, destroyed the Red Keep, and it even melted down the Iron Throne. It's also believed that he is the reincarnation of Balerion, which means, yeah, he's getting much bigger as he ages. Speaking of, Balerion the Black Dread was Aegon the Conqueror's dragon that he rode, and was the biggest dragon to ever be on Westeros. Balerion's size has never been stated, but he was so big that he could swallow a full-grown woolly mammoth whole, and his shadow could cover entire cities. Just his shadow. He's easily the most powerful dragon ever to live on Westeros, and he's the only known dragon to have died of old age. Vhagar is the only other dragon that could rival Balerion's size, but she was still slightly smaller. Dragons are also incredibly intelligent, having great memories, and are great problem solvers. But despite their size, some speculate that the dragons of Old Valyria were just as big as Balerion and Vhagar, if not even bigger. And while there is no real truth to this theory that some were bigger than Balerion, every dragon looks different from each other, so it makes sense that some could just naturally get bigger than others. But anyways, that is the lore of dragons in Game of Thrones. Like and subscribe if you did enjoy. Leave a comment of what you thought and hit the notification bell to be notified of all my future videos and other great stuff. I truly do appreciate it, and I hope you guys have a great day. Peace!